I recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Dingell, for the purpose of offering her amendment designated Dingell number 3. Without objection, the amendment is considered read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment will ensure the Fish and Wildlife Services finishes its species status review of gray wolves. In September 2021, the Fish and Wildlife Service announced the status review after receiving petitions to relist and emergency list the gray wolf. And as several of my other colleagues have stated these statistics, these were the reason that this began, because following the November 2020 delisting of the gray wolf, we saw extreme numbers of wolves being killed. Idaho authorized the killing of 90% of their 1,500 wolves. Montana approved a statewide harvest quota of 450 wolves, representing 40% of the state's population, until an unprecedented number of Yellowstone wolves were killed. Wisconsin allowed the killing of 30% of its wolves in one hunting season. And just in the month of August that year, Idaho reported 17 killings of gray wolf pups, some as young as 1 week old. And because of this misguided delisting of the Northern Rockies population of gray wolves in 2011, gray wolves in the Northern Rockies were being baited, trapped, hunted, and killed in record numbers. I and others on this committee urged the service to do an emergency listing of wolves to stop the killing and give time for a thorough status review, and were disappointed that they only announced a 12-month status review. The court stepped in and restored ESA protections for the wolf populations. I know that's probably why that's part of this bill, but that's not what this amendment's about. Outside of the Northern Rockies, stopping the authorized hunts. Unfortunately, the Northern Rockies population continues to be vulnerable to the misguided state laws and policies that allow hunting, trapping, shooting, and baiting wolves and pay for wolf kills. The species status review is ongoing, and the Fish and Wildlife Service announced it would complete it and propose any next steps by February 6, 2024. It is critical that the Fish and Wildlife Service continue its process to assess the status of gray wolves in the lower 48 throughout the entire range, including the Northern Rockies. Delisting the species by an act of Congress shouldn't set back the scientific analysis. If we're to trust in science, as the bill sponsors, or the bill says, we should ensure that the scientific process is completed in a timely manner and allow it to inform any future listing decisions for that species. Before I urge adoption, I agree with you, my other chairman's gone, with Chairman Westerman, who says we need to be doing more money for habitat, and the states are better at. They do know, which is why I hope we're going to get the RAWA bill passed again this year. We pass it every year. We need to get it through the Senate. Therefore, I urge adoption of my amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Representative Dingell. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I rise to oppose this amendment. First of all, per our conversation earlier, it's duplicative. The states are taking care of the business here. As the gentlewoman from Wyoming laid out very well, as a member of the Natural Resources Committee back in our state legislature, I saw very clearly the millions of dollars that we spent in regards to wolf recovery, as well as making wolf depredation payments, significant amount of money that we put to that. I do have to say, though, to the gentle lady from Michigan, I know you're oftentimes sincere about this stuff, but I'm disappointed in the talking points that you are using, which the word extreme is being used all the time by every speaker on your side of the aisle in this debate. And you included my state of Wisconsin in extreme. And you cited that 30% of the wolves were taken in 2021. They were not. There were 218 wolves that were taken, Mr. Chairman. There are over 1,000 wolves in Wisconsin. That is a minimum count that is done by the state of Wisconsin, and it's shown consistently that there's about 1,000. There's probably 2,000 wolves in the state of Wisconsin. To say that there's 30% that were taken is a lie. Stop repeating it. The Natural Resources Board in the state of Wisconsin in 2021, after delisting, authorized for 200 wolves to be taken. The Department of Natural Resources unilaterally went around the Natural Resources Board, which is a citizen-led group. They went around the Natural Resources Board and said, we're going to reduce that to 117. Because if you took the 200 wolves that were authorized by the Natural Resources Board, and you look at 218 that were taken, that's less than 10% more wolves that were taken than normal, or that were authorized. And if you talk to wildlife managers, they will tell you, that's within the margin of error. That is acceptable. The other thing I would point out, and I mentioned it earlier, in the paper that Adams wrote back in 2008 that has been peer-reviewed, he said you can take up to, he used the number 29%. I'm going to round it off to 30%. You can take up to a 30% of a wildlife population, and it will still be a healthy population. That's a peer-reviewed scientific paper. You have, I'll go back to the, what was on the easel behind me just a few minutes ago. 26 wildlife biologists from the upper Great Lakes, including many that do work in your state of Michigan. They sent a letter to the judge out here in Washington, D.C. and said, you should not be overriding state management of wolves. You should not be relisting the wolf. That would have been about a decade ago, because it has recovered, and you are jeopardizing the Endangered Species Act. We heard the phrase earlier, I think on the other side, the 3 S's, which we all know is shoot, shovel, shut up. And that's what you end up encouraging as a result if people lose respect for the Endangered Species Act. I will just repeat what the gentle lady from Colorado said at the very start of this. The wolf has recovered. And the only reason that we're here today having this argument that's going to end up on a partisan vote, I suspect, is because there are a few corporate, environmental, animal rights group that this is their cash cow. Because I remember when I was in the state legislature, man, did they gin up the emails when we dealt with the wolf issue. It was the #1 thing that would hit my inbox. Europe, Australia, whatever. And where did they come from? They came from the groups that this is their cash cow. Because the science is clear, and we should trust the science. I urge a no vote on this, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. Is there any further discussion on this amendment? I will, Representative Boebert.
The ranking member, was that, okay.